Well, I think we are ready to go for it. Gonna get her done. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday night edition of Accessibly Live, the book club reading room. We are back. We had to pull the plug on the Thursday night conversation station show. As you can tell, I have a voice. Last Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and most of Saturday, there was no voice. And so, in a conversation with my executive producer, we decided we are going to pull the plug and just do a show next week, next Thursday, and see how we do tonight for the book club reading room. So we were talking about this anyway because next week we've got something big for the start here on the show. And we thought we'd take a kind of a breather and we do something a little bit calm and chill tonight. So we're doing a couple short stories. Both kind of fun short stories. One by the legendary Mark Twain. And second one by Frank R. Stockton. Now, you guys know I like reading. I like giving you guys a wide variety of books here on the show. And for all of you who've been tuning in the last few years, thank you. Appreciate it. And you know that we have done a wide variety of things, from the Scarlet Letter to Shakespeare to the abysmally created, and I admit freely that it should have been, it didn't go so well, Theogony. We did Theogony. We did the Greek gods, which went over like a Led Zeppelin around here. So we won't do that again. So tonight we've got a couple good short stories and a big announcement for next Sunday night. And I'm really excited to bring it for you because I actually had a couple people request it. And be it not said that I don't try to bring you guys something different, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Oh, sorry. Wrong conversation. So we want to do something fun for you tonight. And we want you guys, don't forget too that we do have a new big announcement for next week, I should say. Don't forget, guys, we do have a new email that we are doing and using here on the channel. JoelK_OG at protonmail.com. That's JoelK_OG at protonmail.com. We're using that as opposed to what we've had in the past because we seem to be getting better response and it's easier to use. Little long, but yeah. By the way, don't forget, if you guys get a chance, you guys are watching for the first time because the algorithm says I've got a lot of people watching, but nobody liking and subscribing. So please help that poor old algorithm out. Help me out. Hit the like and subscribe buttons on Twitch and YouTube. And let's keep this train rolling and get some more people tuning in and enjoying the shows, plural. Tonight, we are going to take a couple easy little short stories. First one, and we got to douse this because we got to have this come up. We are going to begin with Mark Twain. And honestly, this is one of Mark Twain's more well-known short stories. It's about a frog, a jumping frog, a notorious jumping frog of Calaveras County by Mark Twain. In compliance with the request of a friend of mine who wrote me from the East. I called on good-natured, garrulous old Simon Wheeler and inquired after my friend's friend, Leonidas W. Smiley, as requested to do, and I here to append this result. I have a lurking suspicion that Leonidas W. Smiley is a myth. I have that my friend never knew such a personage, and that he only conjectured that if I were to ask old Wheeler about him, it would remind him of the infamous Jim Smiley, and that he would go to work and bore me to death with some exasperating reminiscence of him, as long and as tedious as it should be useless to me. If that was the design, it succeeded. I found Simon Wheeler dozing comfortably by a barroom stove in a dilapidated tavern in the decaying mining camp of Angels, and I noticed that he was fat and bald-headed and had an expression of a winning gentleness and simplicity upon his tranquil countenance. He roused up and gave me a good day. I told him a friend of mine had commissioned me to make inquiries about a cherished companion of his boyhood named Leonidas W. Smiley. Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, a young minister of the gospel, who he had heard was at one time a resident of Angel's Camp. I ended that if Mr. Wheeler could tell me anything about this Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, I would feel under many obligations to him. Simon Wheeler backed me into a corner and blockaded me there with his chair, and then sat down and reeled off the monotonous narrative which follows this paragraph. He never smiled, he never frowned, he never changed his voice from the gentle flowing key which he tuned to his initial sentence. He never betrayed the slightest suspicion of enthusiasm, but all through the interminable narrative there ran a vein of impressive earnestness and sincerity which showed me plainly that, so far from his imagining that there was anything ridiculous or funny about his story, he regarded it in really important matter, and admired its two heroes as men of transcendent geniuses in finesse. I let him go on his own way and never interrupted him. Reverend Leonidas him Majesty, Reverend Lee, well, there was a fellow here by that name of Jim Smiley in the winter of 49, or maybe it was spring of 50. I don't recollect exactly. Somehow, it makes me think that there was one or the other. It is because I remember some big flume warrant finished when he came to the camp. But anyway, he was the curious man about always betting on anything that turned up you'd ever see. If he could get anybody to bet on the other side, he wouldn't even change his sides. Anyway, that suited the other man would suit him. Anyway, so just so he would bet, he was satisfied. But still, he was lucky, uncommonly lucky. He was always come out winner. He was always ready and laying for a chance. There couldn't be a solitary thing mentioned about the feller that'd offer a bet on. And to take any side you please, as I was just telling you. But there was a horse race. You'd finish him flush, or you'd find him busted at the end. If there were a dog fight, he'd bet on it. If there was a cat fight, he'd bet on it. If there were a chicken fight, he'd bet on it. Why, if there were two birds sitting on a fence, he would bet you which one would fly first. Or if there was a camp meeting, he would be regular to bet on Parson Walker, which he judged to be the exhorter about here, and so he was too a good man. If you ever saw a straddlebug start to go anywhere it was going, and if you looked him up, he would follow that straddlebug to Mexico. But he would find out that he was bound for and how long he would have to be on the road. Lots of the boys here had seen that Smiley and could tell you about him. Why, it didn't make much of no difference about him. He'd bet on anything. That dang fool. Parson Walker's wife laid very sick once for a good while, and it seemed that they weren't going to save her. But one morning he come in and Smiley up and asked him how she was, and he said she was considerable better. Thank the Lord for that infinite mercy, and coming on so smart that with the blessing of Providence, she'd get well yet. And Smiley, for the thought, he says, well, I'll risk 2.5. She don't anyway. 30th year, Smiley had a nightmare, the boys called her, the 15-minute nag. But that was only in fun, because, of course, she was faster than that. And he used to win money on that horse, for all as she was slow and always had the asthma and the distemper or the consumption or something of that kind. He used to give her 200 to 300 yards start, then pass her underway, but was always out at the end of the race, and she'd get excited and desperate like, and cavorting and straddling up and scattering her legs around limber, something in the air. And sometimes out of one of the many fences and kicking up more dust and raising more racket, with her coughing and her wheezing and blowing her nose, and always fetching up at the stand just about the neck ahead, as near as you could cipher it down. And yet, he had little small bullpup that you look up at him, you'd think he weren't worth the cent, but to sent around, look ornery and laid for a chance of steal something. But as soon as money was on him, he would change different dog, was underjawed beginning to stick out like a forecastle of a steamboat, and his teeth would uncover and shine like the furnaces. And the dog might tackle him and rag him and bite him and throw him over his shoulder 2 or 3 times. And Andrew Jackson, which was the name of the pup, Andrew Jackson would never let on but that he was satisfied and hadn't suspected nothing else. And he bets being doubled and doubled on the other side all the time until the money was all up. And then all of a sudden he would grab the other dog just by the hint of the hind leg and freeze on it. Not chaw, you understand, but just grip and hang on there till he'd throw it up the sponge if it were a year. Smiley once didn't have any hind legs on that because they had been sawed off in a circular saw. When the things had gone along far enough and the money was all up, and he come to make a snatch on his pet Holt, he see in a minute how long he'd been imposed on, and how the other dog had been indoors, so to speak, and he'd speared it surprised. And then he looked sort of discouraged like, and didn't try to no more to win the fight, or so he got chucked out bad. He gave Smiley a look, for he was putting up a dog that hadn't have any hind legs for him to take a Holt on, which he was main dependence in the fight. Then he limped off in a piece, laid down, and died. He was a good pup, that Andrew Jackson, and he would have made a good name for himself if he had lived, for the stuff it was in him on the genius. I know it because he had no opportunities to speak of. And he didn't understand the reason the dog to make such a fight. He could understand them circumstances if he had no talent. It always makes me feel sorry when I think of the last fight in his way he turned out. Well, 30-ish year Smiley had rat terriers and chicken cocks and tomcats and all of them kind of things till you couldn't rest. And he wouldn't fetch none of them to bet on, but he'd match you. He'd catch a frog one day and took him home and said he calculated to educate him so that he never done nothing for 3 months but sit in his backyard and learn the frog to jump. And you bet he did learn him. He'd give him a little punch behind, and the next minute you'd see that frog whirling in the air like a donut, see him turn one somersault, or maybe a couple. If he had a good start on him so to catching flies and keeping them in practice so constant that he'd nail a fly every time as far as he could see him. Smiley said all that frog wanted was education, and he could do most anything. I believed him. Why, I'd seen him set Daniel Webster down on the floor. Daniel Webster was the name of the frog. And he'd sing out, "Flies, Daniel, flies." And quicker than you could wink, he'd spring straight up and snake a fly off the counter and flop down on the floor, agile again, as solid as a gob of mud, and fallen to scratching the side of its head with its hind foot, as indifferent as he didn't have any idea what he was doing any more than any frog would. You never seen a frog so modest and so straightforward as he was. All he was gifted. And then it was come to fair and square jumping on dead level. He could get over more jumping in a straddle than any animal of his breed you could see. Jumping on dead level was his strong suit, you should understand. When it came to that, Smiley would ante up money on him as long as he had read. Smiley was a monstrous proud of his frog. And well be for fellers might be traveled, had seen everywheres all he'd laid over any frog they ever had seen. Well, Smiley kept the beast in a little lattice box, for he used to fetch him downtown sometimes and lay for a bet. One day a feller, stranger to the camp, he was, came across him with his box and says, "What might you have in that box?" And Smiley says, sort of different, "It might be a parrot, or it might be a canary. Maybe it, but it ain't. It's only just a frog." Then the feller took it, looked at it carefully, and turned it around this way and that, and said, "So 'tis. Well, what's he good for?" Well, Smiley said, "He's good enough for one thing. I should judge he can out-jump any frog in Calaveras County." The feller took the box again, took a long look, a particular look, gave it back to Smiley and says, very deliberate, "Well," he says, "I don't see no pints about the frog that any better than any other frog." "Maybe you don't," Smiley says. "Maybe you understand frogs and maybe you don't understand them. Maybe you better have experience. Maybe you ain't only an amateur, as it were. Anyway, I got my opinion. I'll risk $40 that he can outjump any frog in Calaveras County." And the feller studied him a minute and then says, kinder and like, "Well, I'm only a stranger here, and I ain't got no frog, but if I had a frog, I bet you." Then Smiley says, well, that's all right. That's all right. If you hold my box for a minute, I'll go get you, Frog. And so the feller took the box and put up the $40 along with Smiley's and sat down to wait. So he sat there a good while thinking and thinking to himself, and then he got the frog out and prized his mouth open, took a teaspoon and filled it with full of quail snot shot, filled him pretty up to the chin, set him on the floor. Smiley went back to the swamp, lopped around the mud for a long time, finally catched him a frog, fetched him in, gave him to the feller, and says, now, if you're ready, and if you set him down alongside Daniel with his forepaws just even with Daniel's, I'll give the word, and then he says 1, 2, 3, get. And him and the feller touched behind the frogs from behind, and the new frog hopped off lively, but Daniel gave a heave and hoisted his shoulders so like a Frenchman, but weren't no use. He couldn't budge. He was planted as solid as a church. He couldn't move more stir than if he were anchored out. Smiley was a good deal surprised, and he was disgusted too. But he didn't have no idea what the matter was, of course. The feller took the money and started away. And when he got out the door, he sort of jerked his thumb over his shoulder and say at old Daniel, and says very deliberate, well, says he, I don't see no pants about the frogs being any better than any other frog. Smiley stood scratching his head and looked down at Daniel for a long time, and then says, I do wonder what in the nation that frog threw off for. I wonder if there ain't something no matter with him. He 'pears to look mighty baggy somehow. Then he catched Daniel by the nape of the neck and hefted him up and says, why, blame my cats if he don't weigh 5 pounds, and turned him upside down, and he belched out a double handful of shot. And then he saw how it was, and he was maddest man, and he set the frog down and took out another that the feller, but he never catched him, and here Simon Wheeler heard his name called from the front yard, and he got up to see what was wanted. And turning to me, he moved away and said, just set here a second there, stranger, and rest easy. I ain't going to be gone a second. But, by your leave, I don't think that continuation of that history of that enterprising vagabond, Jim Smiley, would be likely to afford me much information concerning the Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley. And so I started away. At the door, I met the sociable Wheeler returning, and buttonholed me and commenced. Well, 30-ish Smiley said had a yeller-eyed cow that didn't have no tail, only just for a short stump like a banana, and, however, lacking the both time and inclination, I did not wait to hear about the afflicted cow, and I took my leave. The end. That, just a little bit of fun, and some good old-fashioned storytelling by the legendary Mark Twain. Now, we've got a second short story for you. This one by the gentleman Frank R. Stockton. Little different of a short story. The Lady or the Tiger. And because you guys heard the voice was going a little bit, I'm going to have a little bit of drink here. Yes, it's water. Silly people. The Lady or the Tiger by Frank R. Stockton. In a very olden time, there lived a semi-barbaric king whose idea, though somewhat polished and sharpened by the progressiveness of distant Latin neighbors, were still large, florid, and untrammeled, as became the half of him which was barbaric. He was a man of exuberant fancy, and withal of the authority so irresistible that at his will he turned his varied fancies into facts. He was greatly given to self-consuming, and when he and himself agreed upon anything, the thing was done. When every member of his domestic and political systems moved smoothly in its appointed course, his nature was bland and genial. Sorry. But whenever there was a little hitch, and some of his orbs got out of their orbits, he was blander and more genial still. But for nothing pleased him so much as to make the crooked straight and crush down uneven places. Among the borrowed notions by which his barbarianism had become semified was that the public arena in which by exhibitions of manly and beastly valor, the minds of his subjects were refined and cultured. But even there, the exuberant and barbaric fancy asserted itself. The arena of the king had built was not to give the people any opportunity of hearing the rhapsodies of dying gladiators or enable them to view the inevitable conclusion of a conflict between religious opinions and hungry jaws, but for the purpose far better adapted to widen and develop the mental energies of the people. The vast amphitheater, with its encircling galleries and mysterious vaults and unseen passages, was an agent of poetic justice, in which crime was punished or virtue rewarded by decrees of an impartial and incorruptible chance. When the subject was accused of a crime of sufficient importance to interest the king, public notice was given on the appointed day of the fate of the accused person would be decided in the king's arena. The structure, which was well deserved for its name, although its form and plan were borrowed from afar, its purpose maintained solely from the brain of this man, who every barleycorn of king knew no tradition to which he owed more allegiance than pleased his fancy, and to whom ingratiated on every adopted form of human thought and action the rich growth of his barbaric idealism. When all the people had assembled in the galleries, and the king, surrounded by his court, sat high upon the throne of royal state on one side of the arena, he gave the signal, and a door beneath him opened, and the accused subject stepped out into the amphitheater. Directly opposite him, on the other side of the closed space, were two doors, exactly alike and side by side. It was the duty and the privilege of the person on trial to walk directly to these doors and open one of them. He could open either door as he pleased. He was subject to no guidance or influence, but that, of course, of the aforementioned impartial, incorruptible chance. If he opened one, there came out a hungry tiger, the fiercest and most cruel that could be procured, which immediately sprang upon him and tore him to pieces, as punishment for his guilt. The moment of that case of the criminal was then decided. Doleful iron bells were clanged. Great wails went up from the hired mourners posted on the outer rim of the arena. And the vast audience, with their bowed heads and downcast hearts, wended slowly their homeward way, mourning greatly that one of their young fair, or so old and respected, should have merited so dire a fate. But, but if the accused person opened the other door, there came forth from it a lady, the most suitable to his years and station that his majesty could select among his fair subjects, and to his lady he was immediately married as a reward for his innocence. It mattered not that he was already possessed of a wife and a family, or that his affections might be engaged upon the subject of his own selection. The king allowed no such subordinate arguments to interfere with his great scheme of retribution and reward. The exercises, as in other instances, took place immediately and in the arena. The other door opened beneath the king and the priest, followed by a band of choristers and dancing maidens, blowing joyous airs upon their horns and treading on emphatic measure, advanced to where the pair stood side by side, and the wedding was promptly and cheerily solemnized. Then the brass bells rang forth their merry peals, and people shouted glad hurrahs, and in the innocent man, preceded by children strewing flowers on the path, led his bride to his home. This was the king's semi-barbaric method of administering justice. It was perfect fairness and obviousness. The criminal could not know out of which door would come the lady. He would open either he pleased, having without the slightest idea whether in the next instant he would be devoured or married. On some occasions the tiger came out of the one door, and on some others the other. The decisions of his tribunal were not only fair, but they were positively demonstrated. The accused person was instantly punished if he found himself guilty, and if innocent, he was rewarded on the spot, whether he liked it or not. There was no escape from the judgment of the king's arena. The institution was a very popular one. When the people gathered together on one of the great trial days, they never knew whether they were going to witness a bloody slaughter or a hilarious wedding. This element of uncertainty lent to an interest to the occasion which it could not otherwise have attained. Thus the masses of the community were entertained and pleased, and thinking a part of the community would bring no change of unfairness against this plan. For did not the accused person have the whole matter in his own hands? The semi-barbaric king had a daughter as blooming as his most florid fancies, and with a soul as fervent and imperious as his own. As is usual in cases, she was the apple of his eye and was loved by him above all humanity. Among his courtiers was a young man that of the fitness of blood and lowness of station common to the conventional heroes of romance who love royal maidens. This royal maiden was well satisfied with her lover, for he was handsome and brave to a degree unsurpassed in all his kingdom, and she loved him with an adore that had enough of his barbarism in it to make it exceedingly warm and strong. This love affair moved on happily for many months, until one day the king happened to discover its existence. He did not hesitate nor waver in regard to his duty in that premises. The youth was immediately cast into the prison, and the day was appointed for his trial in the king's arena. This, of course, was a particularly important occasion, and His Majesty, as well as all the people, was greatly interested in the workings and development of this trial. Never before had such a case occurred. Never before have a subject dared to love the daughter of the king. In after years, such things became commonplace enough, but then they were, in no slight degree, novel and startling. The tiger cages of the kingdom were searched for the most savage and relentless beasts, from which the fiercest monsters might be selected for the arena, and the ranks of maidens, youth, and beauty throughout the land were carefully surveyed by competent judges, in order that the young man may have a fitting bride in the case his fate did not determine him a different destiny. Of course, everyone knew that the deed with the accused was charged with had been done. He had loved the princess, and either he, she, or any other one else thought of denying that fact. But the king would not think of allowing any fact of this kind to interfere with the workings of his tribunal, in which he took such great delight and satisfaction. No matter how the affair turned out, the youth would be disposed of, and the king would take an aesthetic pleasure in watching the course of events, which would determine whether or not the young man had done wrong in allowing himself to love the princess. The appointed day arrived. From far and near, the people gathered and thronged the great galleries of the arena, while crowds, unable to gain admittance, massed themselves against the outside walls. The king and his court were in their places opposite the twin doors. Those fateful portals, so terrible in their similarity. All was ready. The signal was given. A door beneath the royal party opened, and the lover of the princess walked to the arena. Tall, fair, beautiful, his appearance was greeted with a low hum of admiration and anxiety. Half the audience had not known so grand a youth had lived among them. No wonder the princess loved him. What a terrible thing for him to be there. As the youth advanced into the arena, he turned, as he was custom, to bow to the king, but he did not think at all of this royal personage. His eyes were fixed upon the princess, who sat to the right of her father. Had not been for the modesty of this barbarism of nature, it was probably the lady would not have been there. But her intense and fervent soul would not allow her to be absent on an occasion in which she was so terribly interested. From the moment that the decree had gone forth that her lover should have decided fate in the king's arena, she had thought of nothing night or day but of this great event and the various subjects connected with it. Possessed of more power, influence, and force of character than any one who had ever been interested in such a case, she had done what no other person had done. She had possessed herself of the secret of the doors. She knew in which of the rooms behind the doors stood the cage of the tiger, with its open front in which waited the lady. Through these thick doors, heavily curtained with skins on the inside, it was impossible that any noise or suggestion should come from within to the person who should approach to raise the latch of one of them. But gold and the power of princesses' woman's will had brought the secret to the princess. Not only did she know in which room stood the lady, ready to emerge, all blushing and radiant, but her door to be opened, but she knew who the lady was. It was one of the fairest and loveliest of the damsels of the court, who had been selected as reward of the accused youth, should he prove innocent of the crime of aspiring to one so far above him. And the princess hated her. Often she had seen or imagined that she had seen this fair creature throwing glances of admiration upon the person of her lover, and sometimes she thought these glances were perceived and even returned. Now and then she had seen them talking together, but it was but a moment or two. But much can be said in a brief space. It may have been on the most unimportant topics, but how could she really know that? The girl was lovely, but she had dared to raise her eyes to the loved one of the princess, and with all the intensity of the savage blood transmitted through long lines of holy barbaric ancestors, she hated the woman who blustered and trembled behind that silent door. When her lover turned and looked at her, and his eyes met hers, it was she sat there paler and whiter than anyone in the vast ocean of anxious faces about her. He saw, by the power of quick perception, which was given to those whose souls are one, that she knew behind which door crouched the tiger, and behind which stood the lady. He had expected her to know. He understood her nature, and his soul was assured that she would never rest until she made plan to herself of this thing. For the youth in which there was any element of certainty was based upon the success of the princess in discovering this mystery. And the moment he looked upon her, he saw she had succeeded. Then it was a quick and anxious glance, and asked the question, which? It was as plain to her as if he shouted it from where he stood. It was not an instant to be lost. The question was asked in a flash, and must be answered in another. Her right arm lay on a cushioned parapet before her. She raised her hand and made a slight, quick movement to the right. No one but her lover saw her. Every eye was on his as he fixed on the man in the arena. He turned, and with a firm, rapid step, he walked across that emptied space. Every heart stopped beating, every breath was held, every eye was fixed immovably upon the man. Without the slightest hesitation, he went to the door on the right and opened it. Now, the point of the story is this. Did the tiger come out of the door, or did the lady? The more we reflect upon this question, the harder it is to answer. It involves a study of human heart, which leads us through devised mazes of passion, out of which the most difficult to find our way. Think of it, readers and listeners, not as a decision to the question dependent upon yourself, but upon the hot-blooded, semi-barbaric princess, her soul at a white heat beneath the combined fires of despair and jealousy. Had she lost him? But who should have him? How often in her waking hours, in her dreams, had she started in wild horror and covered her face with her hands as she thought of her lover opening the door on the side and which awaited the cruel fangs of a tiger. But how much softer had she seen him at the other door? How in grievous reveries had she gnashed her teeth and tore her hair when she saw he started a start of raptured delight as he opened the door to the lady. How her soul had burned in agony when she had seen him rush to meet that woman with her flushing cheeks and sparkling eye of triumph, when she had seen him lead her forth, her whole framework kindled with the joy of multitude, where she heard the glad shouts of the multitude and wild ringing of the bells of happiness. She had seen the priest and the joyous followers advance the couple, and she made make the man and wife before her very eyes, when she had seen them walk away together upon the path of flowers, followed by tremendous shouts of hilarious multitude, in which her one despairing shriek was lost and drowned. Would it not be better for him to die at once and go to wait for her in that blessed regions of the semi-barbaric futurity? And yet, that awful tiger who shrieks that blood. Her decision had been indicated in an instant, but it had been after days and nights of anguished deliberation. She had known she would be asked if she had decided what would the answer be, and without slight hesitation, she had moved her hand to the right. The question of her decision is one not to be made lightly considered. It is not for me to presume to set upon myself as the one person able to answer it. So I leave it all up to you, dear followers and readers. Who came out of the open door? The lady or the tiger? The Lady or the Tiger by Frank R. Stockton. And before that, the legendary Mark Twain, the notorious jumping frog of Calaveras County. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad you guys were here for both the stories. I really am. It was a little bit of fun, a little bit of difference. After long stories that we've been reading lately, it was kind of nice to be able to do something different. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys were able to put up with the voice going away rather quickly. Next week, we have something pretty amazing. We have for you, because somebody asked for it, and I said, sure, why not? Next week, we start a book, a different book here on the channel. A book that a lot of you may have read in elementary school, in high school, in college. It is a book of adventure. It's a book of friendship. It's a book of mystery. It's different. It's unique. It is The Secret Garden. Next week, we will be reading the first 3 chapters of The Secret Garden here on Accessibly Live, the book club reading room. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. Don't forget to, if you get a moment, to please like and subscribe. It helps us out 110%. I am Joel K. This is Accessibly Live, the book club reading room. Every Sunday night live here on Twitch and YouTube, we do public domain books. And occasionally, we do public domain movies, like we did last week. We did for Valentine's Day. The legendary love story Cyrano. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And sounds like you did. I got a couple nice emails from everybody saying that they enjoyed it. Once again, if you want to say hi, let me know how you like the movie, how you guys are liking the short stories. Let me know if you've read The Secret Garden. And would you like to read along with us? You guys know I stumble a little bit on some of the wording. But I'm looking forward to trying and bringing all 26 chapters to you guys. 3 chapters a week. It will take quite a while, take us into past spring. We have a special announcement too, a second announcement. On April Fool's, we will be doing a live movie. And we'll tell you about that more on this coming Thursday night. But I got something special for April Fool's this year. Last year, it was the very first of the Marx Brothers movies. This year, we'll wait and surprise you. But let me know what you guys are up to. JoelK_OG at protonmail.com. I appreciate everybody stopping in on a regular basis. One final quote, as we do at the end of each night, for both the Conversation Station, our Thursday night show, and also for this show. Legendary inventor Henry Ford. When everything seems to be going against you, remember that an airplane takes off against the wind, not with it. Remember, everything seems to be going against you. Remember that the airplane takes off against the wind, not with it. Sometimes we need to remember that once in a while when we're having a tough week, tough month, tough decade. We need to remember that, well, things happen. You trip, you fall, you stumble, fall, you get back up again. You don't just sit there and let life pass you by. You guys be well and safe. Be well, be safe, be kind. Be careful with the world out there. It's still crazy stuff going on in the world right now. We've got the Olympics have just ended. I hope you guys enjoyed the closing ceremonies. I hope you had a good week this past week. I hope you have a good week this week. We will look forward to seeing everybody here this coming Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Be well, be safe, be kind. Take care, all. We will see you all soon. And next week, The Secret Garden, here on Accessibly Live, the book club reading. Take care, you guys.